actually on Facebook.
Yeah.
My husband saw it and knew that I'd be all on that.
Yeah.
And then I was done. Today's our 54th wedding anniversary.
Oh, cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. So sweet.
Michaela's about to have her first anniversary, or maybe her 0 anniversary.
Yeah, day 0, I guess.
Yeah.
My whole wedding is on November 22nd.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
Yeah. We're excited. Everybody always asks me, "The Sloth's gonna be in the wedding?" I'm like, "No, Sloth's not gonna be in the wedding."
Yeah, I'm not gonna have to take your meeting back.
Yeah.
How old is she?
She is 4 months old. So we weighed her a couple days ago and she was 1.7 pounds. Now that is the absolute lightest that she's gonna be because they only go to the bathroom once a week. And we weighed her right after she went to the bathroom, yeah. So when they go, it's a massive event for them because they expel about 1/3 of their entire body weight. So it is a good amount that they're letting out. And it's not just solids, it's liquids as well. So everything is done at the same time. And it's a good thing that they only get the urge to go just once a week like that, because in the wild and in captivity, they go all the way down to the base of the tree to go to the bathroom. They'll hold on to the trunk, wiggle their little booties back and forth and go to the potty. That's about the only thing they do quickly, because when they're down there on the floor, that's when they're most exposed, yeah. And so they've got to get their business done pretty quickly before they go back up to the canopy of the rainforest. And then a week later, doesn't matter if they're in a few trees over, they'll go back to that same tree to go to the bathroom, because at that tree is every week's dung pile that they're always, going to the bathroom there. And in the wild, they'll have a very important symbiotic relationship with a very specific type of moth that lives on their backs that will provide them the bacteria that they use to digest their food. So every time they go down there to use the bathroom, those moths are crawling down, laying their eggs in the dung pile, and then crawling back up. And then a week later, there's always more moths to crawl back up onto the sloths every week. And they need those because they're eating some of those moths. And then in the eating process, and they're licking themselves, grooming themselves, they'll lick up some of that bacteria that they use to digest their food. So it's really important for them that they always do that. And in captivity, then a lot of people wonder, well, how do they digest their food if they don't have any moths on them? Because I said that's how they digest their food in the wild. And they still digest their food the same way, using a bacterial process. But like I said, they're not born with the bacteria, so they have to get it from somewhere.
Correct.
And the first little bit of that bacteria will actually come from their mothers. So a lot of other animals will have that passive immunity pass through their colostrum, the first milk that the mother will have. The sloths don't really have that, but what they'll do is around day 3 is when the baby first starts to be interested in solid food, and they'll start to lick the mom in the corners of her mouth while she's eating and lick up some of the food that she's eating as well as her saliva. And the bacteria that mom has in her gut is also in her saliva. And so then that will be transplanted over into the baby like that. So the bacteria that she has in her gut that she's using to digest her food originally came from her mother. And she'll always keep that bacteria as long as we keep her warm. Now the problem that they face in the wild is that it's never stable, depending on the season that it is. Overnight it can drop as low as 60 degrees in the rainforest, and that's no bueno for a sloth because they cannot maintain their own body temperature. So if their temperature drops and that bacteria is wiped out, that leaves the sloth with no way to digest their food if they don't have those moths on their back, so that's why they need those. Now it is a symbiotic relationship because the sloths benefit, but the moths also do too, because they get free transportation to and from their breeding ground once a week. And then they'll also feed off of the moss and algae that is on the sloth's back that the sloths are utilizing for their camouflage. So they really just look like furry coconuts hanging up in the trees in the daytime. They just stay in the same spot all the time.
Is that where she travels or where she stays?
That's where she stays right now, just because she's still so little that she's not confident with climbing, and that's why I was like, she's being a big girl with her little paws, holding over the side, because she doesn't really do that a whole lot right now. She's gotten a little bit adventurous to where when I uncover her, sometimes she'll climb over to the edge and start to pull herself over and look for where I'm at. Oh, big yawn. And sometimes they'll vocalize too, so the baby sloths, they'll go, meh, meh. And that's their way of like calling for their mom, basically. But after they're weaned, they kind of go from their mom being their source of comfort to then humans being their source of comfort once they go through the ambassador program. But not all sloths are raised that way, and so Flash is a good example of that. He's our oldest sloth that we have, but he's not an ambassador sloth because he did not have the same conditioning that Chloe has had. So up until, he was weaned from his mother, he was always just with his mom, and then after he was weaned, went into an enclosure by himself and never really had people in there working with him. Yeah. So that's what naturally sloths are going to be the most comfortable with. It takes a lot of time and patience and work with these guys to get them to the point where they're actively seeking out human interaction. And that's why she'll do that, where she'll climb onto the edge and start to pull herself and look for me, because they'll seek out that. Like with Zoe and Dash, that are both of our older ambassadors, I just walk into her enclosure and she immediately climbs onto me because she wants to come and have her time to be held. And Dash does the same thing. He's in the transition phase where he still has a little basket that he stays in. We put the whole basket into his enclosure, and during the day he stays in the basket, but then at night, that's when he'll start to climb around a lot more. That's when they get a lot more active. Yeah, but in that basket, all I have to do is just reach my arm down in there to him, and he sees that and he climbs up my arm really quickly.
Now, how did she end up here?
So she came from the same program that Dash and Zoe both came from, and so he has been breeding sloths for over 35 years, and he is in the States. We just don't say exactly where, because if we did, especially if we're on a live stream, because the phone would never stop ringing.
He would go outside and have night.
Yeah, he'd probably never sell us a sloth again. But I will say it's close enough for our first one that we got for Zoe, we were able to drive to pick her up, but far enough that it made it a lot easier than when we got Dash to just fly him over. But he is in the States and has very passionate about what he does, and he specializes in his ambassador sloths, where he raises sloths like this, but has an even bigger program full of sloths. Just like Flash, where Flash is comfortable with being around people. He'll come out and hang on to this branch out here in the kitchen for roughly the first hour in the morning. He can get his breakfast and socialize with us, just be around us. And then he starts pecking at his door, and he's like, all right, it's time for my nap. It's time for me to go back up. Yeah. So he'll go back up, and he kind of comes and goes throughout the day as he wants to. If he wants little snacks or something, he'll come down and kind of peck on the door.
How long do they usually live?
So the oldest sloth that we know of that was born and raised in captivity actually lived to be 54 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then her roommate actually lived to be 52. So that was in a zoo in Germany, and they're definitely doing something right.
Absolutely.
Just having lived that long.
Yeah.
Because typically in captivity it's around 20 to 30 years.
Which is still pretty
Yeah.
good.
Mhm.
I mean,
Now in the wild, as you could guess, sloths that have essentially no defense mechanism, usually their lives are ended by another animal eating them, and so usually their life expectancy is roughly 10 to 15 years in the wild.
yeah, because they're not fast and they're not
Yeah.
against
Really, the
the
only
light.
defense mechanism that they have is just their teeth. They do have extremely sharp teeth, which is what I was saying earlier. And while they would never intentionally bite one of us because they enjoy this type of interaction,
Correct.
if it was a sloth that had never been around anybody before and you tried to go out there and pick it up,
Oh,
it would definitely
absolutely.
eat you alive, yeah. And typically people think about sloth being really slow, gentle, docile animals. But if you provoked one that had never been around somebody before, they would be using up all of their energy to try to get away from you as quickly as possible. And that's what they'll do in the rainforest too, if they're just holding onto a branch, minding their own business in the middle of the day, just kind of resting and digesting their food. And then they see a little bit of movement out of the corner of their eye. They've got to know to look and react over to that movement and determine whether or not it's coming towards them. Because anything that's coming towards a sloth in the rainforest is probably bad news for the sloth.
Correct.
And what they'll do is book it out the very end of the branch as quickly as they can, because the end of the branch is already going to get a lot thinner and start to weigh down under their weight, and may be able to support a 10 or 15 pound sloth weight, but probably not the jaguar. Yeah, so 35 or 40 pounds of a jaguar going out there would probably be enough to break that branch. But that's best case scenario for the sloth, because a jaguar is not going to be able to survive a 100-foot fall, but sloths are built to be able to withstand a 100-foot fall and be completely unharmed. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So on the inside, they're kind of built like trucks. Even the babies, even from the moment that a sloth is born, if they were to fall 100 feet, they would still be able to survive that.
Wow.
Yeah. Their arms look pretty spindly and pretty fragile, but they're actually, they're almost kind of double jointed with all the cartilage and everything that they have in between their bones. And their bones are extremely flexible, so that when they hit the ground, their rib cage kind of flexes under their body weight and then goes back to normal. Yeah. So they don't really experience broken bones or internal damage because there's so much connective tissue holding everything together.
What a sweet baby. Hi, I'm sorry. Were you sleeping?
What's your plan for the rest of the day?
Nothing.
Yeah, just
Then we
back
went
up.
and had some lunch, drove up here and go around, just look around.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we've been up here, even though we're super close.
Yeah. Do you have any other encounters or just with the sloth?
Just with some,
Yeah.
yeah, I could definitely spend the day here with each and every one. And they interact well with each other.
Not really. They're very like the sloths. You mean like all the sloths together? So not yet. All of them right now are all separate. Dash and Chloe have been pretty close because their enclosures are right next to each other. Where Chloe stays in her basket a lot of times, but it's like right next to Dash's enclosure. And so they do pretty well just seeing each other and kind of wondering about each other. But like I said, they are very solitary, and so some bigger organizations will keep all of their sloths together in a really big enclosure. And they do well as long as they all have their separate areas to hang out, but putting them in a small confined place all together wouldn't be the best idea because since they're very solitary, they don't really want to be around other sloths. It could cause issues to put them all together real close. And so we have plans. There's been rumors about maybe building a sloth house where it's like a big greenhouse type thing, where we could put potentially Dash and Chloe and Zoe all together because they are all three of the ambassador sloths. But Flash has always been by himself, and he's already 7 years old, and that's all he knows. So introducing another, yeah. But Dash, Zoe, and Chloe, the facility that they came from, has theirs set up where it's a really big enclosure where all of them are together. So they've been around other sloths before. It's going to be a lot easier to slowly, condition them to being together than it would be for Flash. Okay, give me 1 second. I'll come out and get it.
So I know they have poor eyesight. Can she see?
Not
anything
really.
at
So
all?
they have a condition that's called rod monochromacy. And that means they only have rod cells in their eyes and no cone cells. So the cone cells are what we have that allows us to see color, whereas the rod cells pick up motion. So they are completely colorblind, but they see motion really well, a lot better than we do because they have a lot more cone cells than we do. So a little movement out of the corner of my eye, probably not even going to look at it, going to just deem it as insignificant. But for a sloth, they've got to know to look and react to that because it's a lot more sensitive for them. A little bit of movement, they're going to look to it. And they have to because, like I said, if that little bit of movement could be, something dangerous for them. So while these guys, it doesn't even make sense for these guys to be alive anymore because of how
I
slow
know,
they are. And how they essentially have no defense mechanism. You'd think that a lot more sloths were passing away every day they're being born. They're not on the endangered list just yet. The three-toed sloths are definitely closer to being there than the two-toed because the two-toed, we have a good population of those in captivity, being born and raised in captivity, whereas the three-toed sloths, their diet's extremely sensitive. They really can't keep a three-toed sloth in captivity because they really rely on the sarcopia leaves to eat. Those only grow in South America, So you have to own a three-toed sloth breeding facility, you basically have to be a millionaire because you need a private jet to fly it. And get you all those leaves once a week. And leaves don't keep for very long. So there have been some efforts in southern parts of Florida and California to get some of those groves actually growing, but nobody's had great success with it just yet because those trees really would grow best in a greenhouse environment, but they can grow to be up to 100 plus feet in the air. So you really need
It's going to be a strange greenhouse. Doesn't appear to be too unhappy right now.
She's getting to the point where, when they're little babies, they're still real unaware of all of their environment, still being unsure about all of it. But she is getting to the point where if I come in here, she hears me moving around. If I'm talking to somebody, especially, say she has a little blanket that'll be covered up over her. And she'll start to uncover herself and look up. saying, what's going on around here? Somebody's in here talking.
Y'all hear from me?
Yeah, and then she stays up at the main house in the morning. Donna will go over and take the blinds up from where the enclosure's at over there, and every time she walks by, Chloe goes up and goes, looking to see what she's doing. She's a sweet little girl.
Precious, I'm so glad y'all are doing this. It's great.
Do you have a picture or a phone that you want me to take some pictures?
If you don't mind, yeah. I don't know if it's turned around, my glasses are on top of my head. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you know